Sweet. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, I'm Luke Brooker. I work at Glow Digital. I started there a few months ago. I'm the user experience director or web designer that thinks about people. So pretty much what I'll be going through today with this is, you've probably, well, first off, who's heard of responsive design? All right. And who's went to the talk yesterday about responsive design? Cool. Who's done responsive design? Cool. And has anyone heard of the term future friendly? Cool. Well, so basically the sort of preface for this is there's these guys that got together recently, and there's a site up called futurefriend.ly, and they've sort of come up with some ideas of like how you can sort of start building sites to be not future-proof but future-friendly because of just all the different devices and stuff we're coming up with. And it's not just about responsive design, but how we can start using responsive design in a better way. And I know a lot of people are looking at it and going, how do we actually implement this with clients? So hopefully this will kind of explain a bit about that. I'll sort of say why, they'll give a reason for why of this, and then what it is, and then how you can actually start using it. Cool. So why? So here's some just some stats to go through of like mobile and stuff. So the growth of mobile web has outpaced the desktop web in the last, since it started at about 8 times the speed. People still coming in. And smartphone sales, or like pretty much like a year or so ago, smartphone sales surpassed desktop sales. And then the average time, it's probably gone up from this now, is spent on a day from smartphone is about 30 minutes. But who here uses their phone pretty much at least 30 minutes a day and is just on it? Yeah, pretty much everybody. So worldwide mobile data traffic is due to increase 26-fold to 75 exabytes annually. So that's like 75 times what was used on all of the internet in year 2000, just on mobiles. And 40%, by 2015, 40% of the world's population will actually have access to the internet, but most of those people, especially in developing countries, won't actually touch a computer PC as such. They'll be using it on mobile devices or smaller devices. But future-friendly design isn't about mobile design. There's over 90,000 iPads sold a day. Add to that 190,000 iPhones sold a day, and then 700,000 Android devices activated a day. So it's over 980,000 devices a day that we've got to be thinking about, which means we have more screens to design for than ever, including like you got everything from small devices to TVs, and if you're listening yesterday, apparently even cats. So we need to rethink how we do design. I think some people probably realize this by now, but we've always been designing to like 960 grids and different ways of doing it. But it's sort of, we've been designing like print, when you have a canvas and you like put everything on the canvas, and then that's how it looks, and it's like try and be pixel perfect or anything. So we actually have to rethink how we start designing things and what is the reason for our sites and how we can make data more portable. So we can't be future-proof, but we can be future-friendly. So where do we start? First things, we have to think about, well, the main starting point is the content and the context and people who are using it. So we have to have relevant and actual purposeful content that people need. So who's seen something like this before? Okay. Can you actually see where the actual content is? And really what's the actually important part of this page? It's like right there, there's the only bit of useful stuff of like actual content on the page. And people are like getting sick of it, and then people are saying on their mobile devices, whoop. So people are getting on their mobile devices, and who's heard from a client like, oh, I love how this works on my iPhone app way more than like a PC. It's just easier to use. So we've got to start simplifying. So that starts with content. So I know a lot of people, when you do mock-ups and things, and what's one of the main things to chuck in for your content? It's like lorem ipsum text or something. And so we're more so creating containers rather than actually thinking about what content we're designing around and how we can actually sort of help that and bring it to life more, rather than just, here's your site, chuck whatever you want in it, I don't know what's going to be in there, sort of thing. So you've got to treat it like water. It's going to be going everywhere, so you've got to make sure it's ready to go everywhere. So from mobile devices to normal desktops to like cats, take any shape or form. So context. So quantitative. We've got all these different screen sizes, but you've also got different connectivity, like data speeds. And some people, you think, oh, okay, mobile is always slower. But then you get to things like people that can't get actual ADSL or things to their home, and they're using wireless, might be using wireless Optus internet in the house, and it's actually like really slow. And then their phones are on like Telstra or something, and then they actually can use them. And so they're actually getting faster. So it's not always about being mobile. Like, it definitely is something that we have to look at, but you've got to think all these different options. Device capabilities, we've got these new phones and different things that also have all these extra stuff that PCs don't have, like location awareness and that sort of thing. So how can we optimize in that way as well? And then input methods, like you've got things like voice recognition stuff and everything on iPhones and Android now. We can actually talk to the thing, and how we can start using that in a browser as well. And then we've actually got how people use it. So you're thinking about when people are in these different environments, like what environments are they in, how are they using it, and what do they sort of want to achieve when they'd be in that environment. So here's some ways. So this is what we're used to with the old context. And then the new context, which is not just, people generally think mobile, it's moving around. But there's so many other use cases for using a mobile or other device. So who here does it while they're waiting in line or watching TV? Who uses their mobile? So like so many different things. And in the stores, downtime, and probably even more in the last of people that actually want to say. So we need to start acting differently. So the first thing you would have heard about yesterday is responsive design. Start actually using that to get that book if you haven't figured it out yet. It's a really easy way to learn. It's probably like one of the first things I read. I started getting into this about a year ago, and that was come out about 5 months later, and it sort of really clarified it for me. But then probably just under a year now is when I did my first responsive site. So you just got to keep trying it and doing more things, and you get more used to it and figure out how it works best for you. So mobile first, that's another big issue is, that's another book that they've had, and from a book apart, and it's all about when you're mobile first, you can sort of, because there's like so much more opportunity there, not everybody's there yet, so there's more focus with the constraints. So you're getting rid of like all the extra content and stuff, and because of all the new capabilities, there's a lot more innovation. So if you can sort of understand the ideas of mobile first, research that. That's a really good way to start as well. The structure of your code, because it's got to be portable and it's got to be usable in so many different situations. Actually think about how you can structure your code better so it works everywhere well. And then use best practices. This is just one website that's actually really good for just looking at how the different sort of things people are starting to get used to and the different patterns that are happening on mobile. And you would have heard yesterday talk about progressive enhancement. This is a really good book. there's one other one that designing adaptive websites that's a really good one as well. But yeah, it just sort of, you still want to provide for the lowest common denominator. You want to have like, if you structure your content well and then there's nothing else is working, you can still get through all your content. All right. And then using scripts with like IE and different things, you can sort of, the things that are in responsive design, you won't sort of be able to do some of them in older ones with the media queries. So you got the modernizer that actually includes the HTML shiv stuff, if you haven't heard of that. So you can just use that. But then the main good thing about modernizer is you're not sort of designing with browser detection or sort of device detection. It's more about feature detection and like, does this device have touch? Does it have location? Does it have this? And then it gives you CSS classes where you can actually target those specific things without having to sort of add all this extra stuff. And then the yep note part of it is you can actually test in JavaScript what size screen it is, and then you can conditionally load other JavaScript files. So if you need the extra IE files, you only load them if it's sort of on a bigger screen or something like that. And then the other things that kind of come into here is there's a lot of the responsive images. They're sort of, there's so many ways to do it right now. They probably haven't actually standardized on anything yet because they're still going through the HTML5 like specifications, and they're thinking of doing like a picture element rather than an image element, which will work similar to the video one, where you can actually include multiple size images and then it'll do that for you. So hopefully with Drupal 8, maybe if that starts coming in, that will sort of happen. But for now, there's a lot of JavaScript libraries. There's client-side and the server-side technologies you can use, and there's a Drupal module to do resizable images as well. So that's sort of the gist of like what sort of stuff is involved in getting your site sort of future-friendly. But you might be asking, how do you do it? So I've sort of started this year last year. I've sort of been testing and working around different ways we can have a new workflow. So more of a responsive workflow. So these are the new sort of steps that have, well, some of them are new, some of them are adapted. And then it doesn't involve everything we do, but this is the stuff you really need for doing a responsive stuff. So obviously I do, before even this stage, go through all the user goals and user sort of personas and scenarios and do all the sort of more user experience type stuff. And then you can sort of, content strategy will also come in line with your sort of information architecture and things like that. So content strategy, who's heard of content out design? So it's pretty much designing with, like I said earlier, designing with content first. And so you actually, yeah, just creating your content and then working from there and using it more in all different ways. And then microcopy is really important in terms of, that's like the way you write microcopy is also a big thing to plan in terms of getting users to actually do things you want to do and them finding things easily. And it's like Power Rangers. How is it like Power Rangers? It is, because it's not just a humongous mega, it's a combination of well-crafted pieces of content that come together to form a well-crafted humongous mecha of content. So that was off a 24 Ways article by Relly and Baker. And what it's pretty much saying is, you sort of think of a Power Ranger as like, you got your Red Ranger or your Yellow Ranger. Your Red Ranger is like your words, and your Yellow Ranger might be your video, and Blue Ranger is like your images, and then you got your pink, sort of useless but everyone likes, infographics, and just sort of goes on like that. But then, so all separately, you've got them used in all different ways in your site, especially when you think looking at Drupal and blocks and views and all sorts of things. So it's important we like look at them piece by piece, so we can actually, rather than going, oh, there's so much stuff here, like let's look at this one bit of stuff, get it right, and like focus on like certain points with each bit of content. Right, extracting content. So you probably had, by the way, that's a dog farting, just in case you're wondering. And yes, you can pretty much find a dog doing anything on the internet. So who's tried to get content out of clients and just struggled? So one of the easiest ways you can do it, well, one of the ones, there's like so many. If you didn't go to the session just before lunch, with Raina's session about content, if you can go online after and get that, she just did some really good points on like how to structure your content, and that's like a whole nother talk, content and doing it really well. But one of the main tools I've started using, or am using when you sort of go through your sort of content audit, is for each page creating like a page table where you actually break down what's involved in this bit of content, what's needed. So the objective, probably can't read it, but it's like objective, source content, what's a scope, so just the title, and then you've got your priority stuff, so your message, your method, so what it is sort of thing, like, and how you're conveying your message. A call to action. So when they're finished reading this, what would you like them to do? And then assets as well. And it's like, so what sort of other things that go along with this content that are related to it. And then you've got your secondary content. So additional links, extra microcopy, or things that you want them to do somewhere else on the site and not specifically related. And then you've just got your footer and send links or something like that in a tertiary sort of thing. Then you sort of go through content creation, so content exists, but we create it within the constraints of the previous CMS, review, correct, and edit when necessary. So how are you going to create it? How often it should be maintained, so when this action happens, or annually. And technology, publishing, and policy implications. So sort of should be reviewed once the glossary styles have been decided, no video guide scope. So just, explaining that. Reliance on third parties and outstanding questions for the client. So you can give them this, explain it to them for each bit of content, or sit down with them, go through a few of them. If you are like finding it hard to do it, you can just hire an actual proper content strategy person, somebody that works with content, and just to get the ball moving. So that's what I've started using, and it sort of really helps to sort of at least clarify your message. It would sort of get a lot when you get a lot of content, but it helps you get rid of a lot of things. You sit down with a page, you'd be like, okay, what's the purpose of this? And then you like realize you don't actually need it, so you can start scrapping things. So the next part, wireframing. So pretty much do any wireframing just using paper, paper, and paper. So I don't really try to get too high fidelity with anything. I think with paper you can get like really quick versions out, do at least 5 versions of each page, because by the 4th or 5th you actually you run out of ideas, but you start trying new things that you wouldn't have thought of, and then in the end I might pull a bit from this and a bit from this, and like I've always, like pretty much every time I've done it, once I get past about 3 I come up with some idea that I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did that, but I never would have done it just initially thinking about it. Probably about so you're doing them really quickly too. Don't spend too long trying to think about it. Just like start putting things down. And then I always, with the mobile first stuff, start creating your sort of mobile sort of size, and then working out from there, because it sort of helps you simplify things. You get rid of things that you don't need, and then you can sort of move on to like maybe a tablet size, and then desktop. If it's sort of on a budget, I sort of stick to mobile, desktop, and then you sort of work in between later. But at least mobile and desktop when I start doing responsive stuff. And if you're just a designer, if you don't know how backends and things, the backend of like say Drupal or something works, or how you can actually start implementing things. It's really good to get developers and designers working together so you can actually see what's going to work, what's not going to work. But if you're a designer, you can get an understanding of it if you actually code, which I'm sure probably most people here would be, at least if they're a designer somewhat. So when you've come up with some things you think are really good and you've put them together, walk through them as like a user. So if you have like created your personas like earlier in the project, actually go through as each one of those and go, okay, how is this going to flow? Which sort of go through steps of the goals that they were going to achieve, and see how that will work on paper, so you can just quickly change things right there and then without having to sort of figure it all out later. And then when you finish with them, finalize and document them. So this is an example of one that I did just for the client. So it's fairly, not too much extra markup, but like fairly basic. I just do it in Illustrator, so it's not, I try to keep it at still really low fidelity, but a bit clearer than just, because I'm a pretty horrible sketcher. But yeah, you just explain some of the things that you need to explain to the client. And then after I've done this, so you document to the client and just really quick. And then when you finish with that and they've finalized, they've approved your sort of wireframes, then you can start actually doing a bit more detailed, like a document for the developers, so they can actually see what's a view, what's a block, what's a bit of content, like how you can actually set, like what's a menu, how you're actually going to separate this design and what's going to be what. So how do we mock up responsive designs? So when it initially came around, people were still doing sort of, or they still are, they're still doing a straight Photoshop mock-up, 960 wide, and then we'll just make it sort of smaller and figure it out later. And I think that's probably one area where people struggle with a bit, is actually getting like a design out and still seeing how it works on all different screens. So one thing that I've started using, this is my air quotes slide, is style tiles. So you separate the style from the design. So rather than actually giving them the layout, you're just giving them all the elements already styled. But it doesn't even have to be the whole finished thing, but just so you start getting a feel for like a feeling and the emotions of the site. And then it's a lot quicker than mock-ups. I just have like 1 or 2 documents, and you can do 2 different or more versions of just like stuff like this, where you got some possible colors, some textures. If you've done any research with the client beforehand and you've got sort of ideas of the words they like to use with the thing, you sort of put them in there and sort of style them along with the content. Hid that logo from there, but just like examples of a few headers, the colors you might be using. And then the client can get a good idea, and that's sort of the stage where they can get a lot more feedback from the client. So it's not a mood board as such as, it's not all airy-fairy in terms of like all different other things. You're actually using real elements that you should be using in the site. But it's really good for getting feedback from the client early, and they're not looking at layout, they're just looking at what is usually what you end up with problems with clients, is they say, oh, I don't like this blue thing and that thing, but they're looking at layout as well, and then they end up messing up your whole thing because they're trying to actually create the flow of your website, where really it's just they're looking at style sort of thing. So the person that came up with this is actually a Drupal sort of person, and she has done this talk at the DrupalCon I think she did the first one in Chicago, and I think they have their presentation. If you go to that address there, her presentation is online on the DrupalCon website. I think she's doing it again at the Denver one as well. Cool. And so the next thing, after I've sort of confirmed that sort of the style with the client, then I come up with a style guide, or a web-based style guide. So sort of documenting all the elements that you're going to be using. So has anyone used this module before? The style guide? No? Well, it's it's sort of, what it does, it puts like all your H1s and your paragraphs and all your error messages all on one page, so you can just see what your CSS is. The only problem I find with this is you have to have a Drupal site running to do it, and I'm not there yet. We're still designing. So what Jeremy Keith has come up with is a thing called a pattern primer, which is, it's on GitHub, that address. But what it is you can just chuck in, he's got a folder called patterns, and every single different element on page gets its own little HTML file. And then he's got a PHP script that just runs, and it'll put every bit of HTML on the page in order, and then it'll actually display in an input box what the content is behind that element. So you can actually, developers, if they're starting to build the site, they can come in and get exactly what they should get for the markup when they start putting it together. So we need this element here, this element there. So if you're working with a lot of Drupal and you're not going to change the output, you can start putting in this Drupal sort of, you know how Drupal's going to output it, you put those styles straight into the pattern library. What was I say? And then the way I structure it, I do all the pretty much basic stuff, all your H1s and paragraphs and everything that's in every page, and then separate it down to all your Drupal stuff, so anything that's specifically related to Drupal, your error messages, different, like your tabs, all that sort of stuff. And then a site-specific section, so you can just start doing anything that's related to this website, and you're basing it all off the things that, sort of these styles and things that you've had in the style tiles. Where am I going? Cool. So advantages of this is like keeps everybody using the same code, so you don't have things where you like got like a photo gallery and a video gallery. They start using different, like they're outputting different things, and then you end up redoing the same CSS. You're just using multiple, like redoing lots of stuff over different sites. Like I said, you start with basic, then Drupal, then site-specific. And then you can reuse them. Like once you've got your basics and your Drupal stuff, that's like what you usually use on every site. And then all your site-specific stuff is the only stuff that you need to change. And then you can also work, like there's another thing where developer and designer can work together and start like creating this stuff before it gets too out of hand and too hard to change. So rapid prototyping. So I geek out a little bit. These are all the tools that I've started using to get really quick rapid prototypes. So what I mean by rapid prototypes is just still before you even go into Drupal, you're taking all this, you got your wireframes, now you've got your style tiles, you've got your style guide. You can start pretty much creating your layout, and then you start using your style guide and putting them into the places that like it is on the wireframes, and developing your different layout, like screen layouts. So I use a sort of boilerplate or a sort of starter template, I guess, which is 320 and up. That's on GitHub as well, but I think Andy Clark created that. And it's a really good starter. It's got all the media queries and stuff in there already. And it's sort of, I find, and then I end up transferring, I have a base theme that's based on that as well, so I just move them all over once I've actually got this sort of started. So I can pretty much take all the same CSS, put it in, but then I've already got all the actual theme template files all ready to go that have all that sort of stuff. A big part of it is like a dynamic style sheet language or a CSS preprocessor. So has anyone heard of less Sass or Stylus? So, I mean, I've sort of put off doing these sort of things. So I was like, oh, no, I'm pretty good with CSS. I don't really need it. But once you actually use it, and it's already built into the 320 and up theme, he's only got his own mix-ins and different things, you can have, like, say, base color as a variable in your CSS. You can sort of use that variable everywhere else in your style sheet. Then whenever you want to change the color, you just change that one variable, and all the colors change. And then it also has functions. So you can say, I want the link color to be the base color, and then I want the link hover to be the base color, but darkened by 10%. And so you can have different colors, but only change one variable. And it's just, and you can even do like complementary. This is a complementary function. You can flip them around. So at the basics, you can do that sort of stuff. And I use a lot of mix-ins too, which what they are is they're separate files. And in that sort of stuff, in Less and Sass, you can actually use functions. So say really basic version is border radius, all the CSS3 stuff where you've got to do multiple vendor stuff. You can have a function called border radius. Rather than typing out every single one, you go dot border radius and then what size you want the actual, like then 5 pixels in brackets. And then it'll put out all the code that'll actually, that you need to actually do that properly. And it sort of works. You can put clearfix stuff in there, which we don't need because it's Drupal, we already have it. But then grid systems I don't use actual grid systems in the way that you're actually having a separate CSS file and you have to keep pulling like using classes and stuff, and it gets messy. Rather than actually putting different class names on, you actually can just call straight to this grid system thing, say like dot column 3, so it's like a 3 wide column, and then it'll actually put in all the CSS just straight where that it needs to be, and not be reusing all this extra stuff and causing a lot of bloat. And then I use a compiler, I use CodeKit on Mac, and there's a simple S one, but because like if you're not in Drupal, I know there's a Drupal module that puts the less sort of JavaScript on the page for you, so you can all compile it like on the client side. But I prefer just to get it sort of done, and then you're outputting a CSS file, and then you're using that later. And especially if you're not already in Drupal, if you're still doing your prototyping. CodeKit is awesome because it just sits there running in the background. You create projects, you drag them in there. As soon as you save your less file, it automatically compiles your CSS one, reloads Chrome or Safari, whatever you're using, and you can see it straight away, like already there. And it'll tell you if there's any errors. It even has like JavaScript stuff in it as well. And Simple S is one that is on PC as well, but it's doesn't do quite as much stuff. CodeKit has this frameworks thing where you can actually put in all that mix-ins, but it's a bit too hard to explain it all now. But if you go look into CodeKit stuff, it's still free. I think they might end up charging like $10 for it or something when it's out of beta. So the good things about rapid prototyping is, like before, the designer and developer can work together. So you would have sort of got the theme by now. A lot of this is like getting people to sort of agile, but like it's like not capital A agile. So you're getting like sort of people working together early before you start doing any major functionality stuff ups and different things. So you can see the sort of like as you're prototyping, you can show the client, and then they can see it in the different widths straight away. And you can scale it, and you can see it all working, and before you actually start coding it in Drupal. And yeah, it's pretty much what your style guide is, but then you're actually giving it a layout. So every step is sort of adding to the next step and making the next step easier to do. So what I've actually found is it actually ends up, I've got it down now that you can pretty much just using this, I can get it done in about the same amount of time as I used to do a site, doing a mock-up, sending mock-ups back, and coming back, and then doing it all from sort of the old way and pixel perfect and all that. If you just it's all about sort of getting things done quickly and rapidly, and just getting lots of feedback from the client along the way, and getting designers and developers to work together. So once you've got all that done, you can start theming. And pretty much, I've just got my base theme that I sort of start with. You could sort of do your own thing. I've looked into Amiga theme and stuff. I just sort of don't quite like that because of the way this process works. I've already done all the code and got it all sort of running, and then if I have my base theme ready to go, that sort of will all go sort of transition quite well into there if it's in the same workflow. So yeah, hopefully when you have that all done, you can get into Drupal without freaking out and worrying about the responsive design and why is this showing up over here, and everyone's got documented stuff on like how things should look and how things should work, and if designers are in the middle of something like, oh, actually we need a gallery of this there, they're just pulling it straight from patterns or different style guides. So remember, start working together, and it's still a learning, it's still a big learning sort of thing even for me, but it's sort of just remember to like let people know where you share things with other people. Everyone's going to be sort of finding out new ways of doing things. It's back to almost where, well, probably more so than where when tables and CSS transition happened. It's like actually where the web is sort of coming into its own rather than print media. So we can actually the more people start learning and sharing and doing it, the quicker we can progress with it. And remember to have fun doing it, because I don't know, I love this sort of stuff, and I think it's really cool. And yeah, if you want to ask me any questions, I think we've got a bit of time. But I know it's a bit confusing, all of it, but sort of hopefully that helped. Yeah, microphones. Yeah.
Not so much a question, but a remark. You mentioned the 320 up. I believe for Drupal Down Under, the 320 up module was used. It's only, or was actually created for it. So just thought I'd mention that.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I did. So I saw that a while ago when it was still in development, but it wasn't.
I think it still is. But
oh yeah, yeah.
at the same time, they used it.
Yeah. Cool.
Just pop your hand up if you've got a question.
Hey, thanks for the talk. How long would you spend on that whole process you just described? Like, for say a simple site or a relatively simple site, how long would it take to build a theme?
Okay, so from very basic, well, I just sort of in the middle of one. That is like really basic in terms of it's not quite even Drupal sort of going into Drupal.
Yeah.
And I've done from like talking with the client, and I'll have it finished all live, including like a logo design, in I think about 4 days. Not including the Drupal sort of side of it, but I've done a Drupal one and that was before I refined it this much, but I've done it in Drupal in about 2 weeks, just me doing the whole thing. So,
thank you.
But yeah, it can sort of, as you sort of get bigger and bigger sites, you can sort of take out or spend more time on different stages. I know for this really short one, I've sort of skipped, well, the rapid prototyping is me building the site because I'm just doing it straight in HTML. But I just gave them 2 style tiles. The wireframes I only needed to do 2 different layouts. I sort of do heaps of layouts and different versions of the layouts, but then I just figure out which ones I am happy with, and that's the ones that I show to the client and document. And they just needed the different versions. So I guess the bigger your site you get, the more wireframes and things you're going to need, and pretty much creating different screens. So you're figuring out the different all the different layouts that you're going to need, and getting that to them. And then, yeah, I guess every stage is can be as big or as small as you need it to be for that sort of one. So yeah, I hope that. Oh, yeah.
Regarding the style tiles, do you get clients just signing off on that as the design, or do they ever request to see the fully realised design?
I get them to sign off on that as how they want it to look, in terms of it's still not, I guess, classified as the full design. That would be where you come in with the rapid prototyping sort of stuff. But that's one thing I was going to add. If you are working on bigger sites, you might end up needing to still do mock-ups and things, but I would probably do that stage probably just before the style guide. So after you do the style tiles, then you've got your wireframe and you've got your style tiles. You've got them both signed off, and then you just pretty much can put them together into Photoshop, and you've already worked a lot of things out. but then you sort of got to do the different versions, obviously. Yep.
Thanks. Information architecture, when does that fit in if you've got multiple node types and taxonomies and all that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, I do that probably right before any of this stuff. It's sort of part of the content strategy. So it's sort of, I try and do a lot in the kickoff meeting, have a fairly long kickoff meeting, have a lot of ideas. And the bigger the project, the more that's like a whole nother thing as well, like all the user experience stuff, doing user research first, working with the client to get when the content strategy is happening, you can sort of see what you're going to need, and then that's where you can kind of cut things down with information architecture. And then you start it there, and then you sort of refine it during the wireframing sort of stage a bit, because then you might be like, oh, that element's not going to work there. Let's try something else. But pretty much by the end of the wireframing, I've got it nailed, sort of in terms of the information architecture. And then, yeah, that's sort of another step in there as well, I guess. That's just, I didn't know how much I was going to have fit in, but actually, I probably went a bit fast. But, but yeah, hopefully you got sort of the idea of it out, and just want to sort of, I don't have all the answers. It's not like the way to do it, but it's sort of a lot of things I'm doing, and it's a lot of all the ideas I see out there at the moment. So they're all sort of new things that people are doing with the style tiles and yeah, sort of rapid stuff. So yeah, hope that answers it. Cool. Yep.
At the start of the presentation, you talked about images for mobile and responsive images, so sizing down images. What techniques or methods do you recommend or use for that?
Yeah, if you're doing it in Drupal, I mean, there's the responsive images module at the moment, and then you can use that. Or, I mean, sometimes I find it's funny. The bigger layouts, I don't really like images to just be like really big on the thing. I end up like moving the layouts around. So I find I am using not as big images on the big one. They're about the same size in the mobile sometimes. So, I mean, that's really small projects. You can almost get away with only using the one image, but it's as big on the mobile side as it is on the desktop, and I just make sure I use really good compression. But yeah, obviously that's not going to be right for everyone, and you kind of want to use sort of I think it's, I saw even another one. There's like about 3 articles last year on 24 ways of just different ways you can do it. So, and like I said, there might be the picture thing coming out, and so you just got to research and find out what's right for you. Because at the moment, I just use the responsive images module because, yeah, cool. That's it. Okay, cool. Got a minute left. Sweet. Thank you very much. Design, I think some people probably realize this by now, but we've always been designing to like 960 grids and different ways of doing it. But it's sort of, we've been designing it like print, when you have a canvas and you like put everything on the canvas, and then that's how it looks, and it's like try and be pixel perfect or anything. So we actually have to rethink how we start designing things and what is the reason for our sites and how we can make data more portable. So we can't be future-proof, but we can be future-friendly. So where do we start? First things, we have to think about, well, the main starting point is the content and the context and people who are using it. So we have to have relevant and actual purposeful content that people need. So who's seen something like this before? Okay. Can you actually see where the actual content is? And really what's the actually important part of this page? It's like right there, it's the only bit of useful stuff of like actual content on the page. And people are like getting sick of it, and then people are saying on their mobile devices, whoop. So people are getting on their mobile devices, and who's heard from a client like, oh, I love how this works on my iPhone app way more than like a PC. It's just easier to use. So we've got to start simplifying. So that starts with content. So I know a lot of people, when you do mock-ups and things, and everything on iPhones and Android now, we can actually talk to the thing, and how we can start using that in the browser as well. And then we've actually got how people use it. So you're thinking about when people are in these different environments, like what environments are they in, how are they using it, and what do they sort of want to achieve when they'd be in that environment. So here's some ways. So this is what we're used to with the old context. And then the new context, which is not just, people generally think mobile, it's moving around. But there's so many other use cases for using a mobile or other device. So who here does it while they're waiting in line or watching TV? Who uses their mobile? So so many different things. And in the stores, downtime, and probably even more in the last of people that actually want to say. So we need to start acting differently. So the first thing you would have heard about yesterday is responsive design. Start actually using that to get that book if you haven't figured it out yet. It's a really easy way to learn. It's probably one of the first things I read. I started getting into this about a year ago, and that was come out about 5 months later, and it sort of really clarified it for me. But then probably just under a year now is when I did my first responsive site. So you just got to keep trying it and doing more things. What's one of the main things to chuck in for your content? It's like lorem ipsum text or something. And so we're more so creating containers rather than actually thinking about what content we're designing around and how we can actually sort of help that and bring it to life more, rather than just here's your site, chuck whatever you want in it. I don't know what's going to be in there, sort of thing. So you've got to treat it like water. It's going to be going everywhere. So you've got to make sure it's ready to go everywhere. So from mobile devices to normal desktops to cats, take any shape or form. So context. So quantitative. We've got all these different screen sizes, but you've also got different connectivity, data speeds. And some people, you think, okay, mobile is always slower. But then you get to things like people that can't get actual ADSL or things to their home, and they're using might be using wireless Optus internet in the house, and it's actually really slow. And then their phones are on Telstra or something, and then they actually can use them. And so they're actually getting faster. So it's not always about being mobile. It definitely is something that we have to look at, but you've got to think all these different options. Device capabilities, we've got these new phones and different things that also have all these extra stuff that PCs don't have, like location awareness and that sort of thing. So how can we optimize in that way as well? And then input methods, you've got things like voice recognition stuff on the web since it started at about 8 times the speed. People still coming in. And smartphone sales, or pretty much a year or so ago, smartphone sales surpassed desktop sales. And then the average time, it's probably gone up from this now, is spent on a day from smartphones is about 30 minutes. But who here uses their phone pretty much at least 30 minutes a day and is just on it? Yeah, pretty much everybody. So worldwide mobile data traffic is due to increase 26-fold to 75 exabytes annually. So that's 75 times what was used on all of the internet in year 2000, just on mobiles. And 40%, by 2015, 40% of the world's population will actually have access to the internet, but most of those people, especially in developing countries, won't actually touch a computer PC as such. They'll be using it on mobile devices or smaller devices. But future-friendly design isn't about mobile design. There's over 90,000 iPads sold a day. Add to that 190,000 iPhones sold a day, and then 700,000 Android devices activated a day. So it's over 980,000 devices a day that we've got to be thinking about. Which means we have more screens to design for than ever, including like you got everything from small devices to TVs, and if you're listening yesterday, apparently even cats. So we need to rethink how we do. Sweet, cool. All right. Well, yeah, I'm Luke Brooker. I work at Glow Digital. I started there a few months ago. I'm the user experience director or web designer that thinks about people. So pretty much what I'll be going through today with this is, you've probably, well, first off, who's heard of responsive design? All right, and who's went to the talk yesterday about responsive design? Cool. Who's done responsive design? Cool. And has anyone heard of the term future friendly? Cool. Well, so basically the sort of preface for this is there's these guys that got together recently, and there's a site up called itsfuturefriend.ly, and they've sort of come up with some ideas of like how you can sort of start building sites to be not future-proof but future-friendly because of just all the different devices and stuff we're coming up with. And it's not just about responsive design, but how we can start using responsive design in a better way. And I know a lot of people are looking at it and going, how do we actually implement this with clients? So hopefully this will kind of explain a bit about that. I'll sort of say why, give a reason for why of this, and then what it is, and then how you can actually start using it. Cool. So why? So here's some just some stats to go through of like mobile and stuff. So the growth of mobile web has outpaced the desktop